Welcome back to our role-based webinar series, which we have been hosting throughout 2022 and began in the fall of 2021. Today, we will focus on the role of transportation directors in school safety efforts, which include safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness activities. My name is Allison Curtis, and I am the Director of Information and Product Management at the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, also known as the REMS TA Center for short. As with all of our webinars in the series and beyond, there are a few tips for engaging with the platform and with us throughout the event. We've placed links to relevant online resources in our web links pod, so please explore those pages and feel free to share them with your colleagues. You're welcome to pose any questions in the Q&A pod or communicate any technical difficulties that you've experienced. We'll be answering questions following the presentation and as time permits. The handouts pod contains relevant documents for you to download, such as our resource list for this webinar and presentation slides. And then after this live event, please send any questions to our help desk at info@remstacenter.org. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available in archived form on our site within 7 business days after the live event. I am very happy to introduce our guest speaker for today. Stephen McElroy was hired in May 2021 as the Director of Safety and Security for Westerville City Schools in Westerville, Ohio. Previous to that position, he was the Executive Director of Business and Operations for Columbus City Schools from 2015 to 2021 and was the Director of Safety and Security for Columbus City Schools from 2005 to 2015, obtaining his MBA in May of 2013. A retiree from the Columbus Police Department, having provided 14 years of dedicated service, he brings over 22 years of experience in emergency management for schools, security assessments, grant management, and writing policies and procedures. Serving as the REMS TA Center Master Trainer for the U.S. Department of Education Office of Safe and Supportive Schools has given him the opportunity to train many school districts across the nation on Emergency Management 101. He also assisted in the development of the federal government's model implementation plan, creating global emergency management tools, and even with an executive committee member, Given Attention Alternatives Initiative, a member of the Chiefs and Security Directors Group, and project director of 2 emergency response crisis management grants totaling over $1 million. We are so pleased to have Stephen join us today and share his insight on this topic. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. First, we'll provide an overview of the importance of collaborative planning for all settings and all times in school emergency operations plan development. Then our guest presenter will provide a closer look at the role that transportation directors can play in school safety. The REMS TA Center will discuss how school transportation directors can enhance the 6-step planning process. A question and answer session will follow, and then we'll end with key resources to support your work. We will also be hosting a 30-minute web chat on our community of practice immediately following this event to answer any remaining or additional questions. Log in or register for the community of practice now and get ready to chat online using the web links pod. So let's get started. Have you heard about the REMS TA Center today, before today's session? If so, in what context? We do have a poll for you to answer on your screen. Have you attended one of our live trainings at your site? Have you attended a virtual training such as a webinar like this or one of our virtual trainings by request? Have you requested technical assistance from us, downloaded a resource, met us at a national conference, or have you interacted with us in some other way? Thank you for responding to our polls. I'm seeing a variety of responses. Many of you are just meeting us for the first time. And then we have about a third of you all have attended one of our virtual trainings. A third of you all have downloaded a resource. But there has been interactions in all of these categories. So it's really great to have you all here attending our webinar. Thank you for answering this poll question. We can close and move on to the rest of our presentation. So if this is your first time, again, welcome. The U.S. Department of Education's Office of Safe and Supportive Schools administers the REMS Teen Center to help build the preparedness capacity, including prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery efforts of schools, school districts, and institutions of higher education with their community partners at the local, state, and federal levels. REMS TA Center staff members are available via email or phone to respond to your requests for technical assistance on emergency operations plan development. Families and students expect schools and school districts to keep their children and youth safe from threats, including crime and violence, as well as hazards like natural disasters, disease outbreaks, and hazardous material spills. In collaboration with their community partners, schools and school districts can plan for these potential threats and hazards through the creation of an emergency operations plan, or an EOP, that accounts for all settings and all times. The school EOP describes how people, not just students, but also educators, administrators, school bus drivers, and visitors, as well as property, can be protected on and off campus. It also details who is responsible for carrying out specific actions before, during, and after an emergency, identifies the personnel, equipment, facilities, supplies, and other resources available, and outlines how all actions will be coordinated. While school EOPs vary in their contents as they are customized according to the school building, they generally contain three main sections. The basic plan section provides an overview of the school's approach to emergency operations, such as training, exercises, and information collection. The functional annexes section presents how the school will manage common essential functions like evacuation, communication, accounting for all people, etc., before, during, and after an emergency. And the threat and hazard specific annexes section identifies protocols schools will follow to address the specific emergencies, such as hurricanes, wildfires, tornadoes, food contamination, and power outages. School EOPs should be developed by school-level emergency planning and response teams with membership from the district's core planning team. The formation of this multidisciplinary planning team is step one of the six-step planning process that is outlined within the guide for developing high-quality school emergency operations plans, known as the school guide, and the role of districts in developing high-quality school emergency operations plans, known as the district guide. These guides may be used by core planning teams to create new plans as well as to revise and update existing plans. You can access the at-a-glance versions of these guides from the web links pod or download the PDFs from the REMS TA Center website. But why collaborate? Well, because the planning and the development of a school EOP requires the expertise of a diverse group of people so that it reflects the diverse needs of the school community. Everyone has expertise to contribute: teachers, school facility managers, information technology specialists, families and parents, nurses, psychologists, community engagement specialists, school administrators, mental health professionals, and of course, school transportation directors, which is why we are here today. Transportation directors have a wealth of knowledge about their bus fleet, bus drivers, and routes not only for school buses, but also pedestrians and bicycles. According to the 2017 National Household Travel Survey, a third, or 33.2%, of children who travel to school took a school bus, and 10.4% walked or biked. But how does that knowledge relate to and impact a school EOP? Well, first, the transportation director can help the planning team take into account various settings and times of the school day, including before and after school, because an emergency may occur at any time. For example, what should students, teachers, bus drivers, crossing guards, and other staff do if there is an incident? What happens if they're on a field trip, or they're en route to an athletic event, or partaking in an extracurricular activity on or off campus? Planning for all settings and all times is an essential element of EOP development, and transportation directors play a critical role in implementing this planning principle. On your screen, you see some examples of threats and hazards that may occur during or have implications for transportation. They include natural hazards, technological hazards, adversarial and human-caused threats, and biological hazards. Transportation directors should develop these threat or hazard-specific annexes to ensure that all settings and all times are taken into account, including on school buses and during transportation. The U.S. Government Accountability Office released a study in 2017 and found that fatal school bus crashes are a very low percentage of all fatal motor vehicle crashes, less than 0.3%. So bus crashes are a potential threat that planning teams may identify, but ultimately may not address in the EOP. School buses may also be used during and after an emergency for response and recovery efforts. For example, they may be used to transport the whole school community to an off-campus evacuation site. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw school buses being used in a few ways to support continuity of operations, delivering school meals to students at home and to continue feeding and food distribution, and carrying mobile hotspots to provide internet connectivity to students at home to continue teaching and learning. School buses may also be used after large-scale emergencies to transport displaced students, sometimes from neighboring counties, to and from schools to continue providing services under the McKinney-Vento Act. These examples demonstrate why transportation directors should, one, be a part of the planning team, and two, contribute to the development of functional annexes such as, but not limited to, evacuation, continuity of operations, and recovery. Now we would like to check in with all of you, our audience, to get some feedback via a poll. What role do you play in school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness? Are you a part of the emergency operations plan, development team, incident response? Do you partake or lead training or exercises? Are you part of recovery, or is there another aspect of preparedness that you partake in? And if so, let us know via the others pod on the screen. Seeing a majority of you play a role in EOP development and incident response. More than half of you also play a role in training or exercises. At least about a third of you are partaking in recovery. Many of you have a role in all of these. We have a concerned parent in attendance today. State government. Well, it's wonderful to have you all, and thank you for participating. We appreciate you giving a sense of who's joining today from the field. Please do not hesitate to pose any of your questions to us via the Q&A pod throughout this event. With that foundation of the importance of collaborative planning and planning for all settings and times, as well as information on how school transportation directors support these concepts, our guest presenter will now provide us with a closer look at the role of transportation directors in school safety. I'm happy to turn things over to Stephen now.
Thank you, Allison. I'd also like to thank the U.S. Department of Education and the REMS TA Center for this phenomenal opportunity to discuss transportation directors supporting school safety efforts. And I want to say hello to everyone on this web. Thank you for all that you do to transport, protect, move our students each and every day and everything you go through to keep our kids safe and getting our students to and from school on a daily basis. It's an amazing thing, so thank you. So let's dive right into this and discuss transportation's involvement. And first and foremost, I really want to just make sure that we're clear that school buses are safe, and they're the safest vehicle on the road. Children are very safe when riding a bus to and from school. And also, we work very hard not only to help transport students on our buses, we also work very hard to help with safe routes to school when kids are riding bikes, walking to school, etc. And bus transportation directors work extremely hard to create sufficient routes on our buses to and from school, to after-school events, etc., to ensure that they're all safe before, during, and after school. I just want to make sure that we're clear that buses are safe, and all the individuals I'm sure on this call and others are ensuring that we build safe routes and we're involved on a daily basis to get our students to and from school. Now, when we talk about involving ourselves with school safety, it all starts with this collaborative approach when creating our emergency operations plan. Obviously, our schools, our community partners, our first responders, and others have to work together to identify the threats and hazards in our community that we have to be ready to react to. And in doing so, we have to follow all of the local, state, and federal laws. But this collaborative approach, which I'm sure many people on this webcast have been involved in, has to include, obviously, our transportation directors, other staff from transportation, building administrators, first responders, and many other local and agencies to identify those threats and hazards and then work towards what our responses should be as it relates to transportation. And again, I can't emphasize the fact that we have to ensure that we're following all laws, all policies and procedures as they're outlined for us. And for me, when I worked for Columbus City Schools, when we developed our emergency operations plan a few years ago, transportation was at the table. Transportation had to help identify those threats and hazards and also identify their role, our role, when moving students or whatever transportation had to do based on each threat and hazard. So when we're talking about forming this collaborative team, we're talking about including transportation directors and other transportation staff to help identify these threats and hazards. I realize that when we discuss these threats and hazards, talking to transportation directors and their staff help to really identify some of those threats or hazards that maybe others haven't thought about, or the proper responses that need to take place before, during, and after an emergency. And it may be in an urban area, a suburban area, or even a rural area. So identifying these threats and hazards are critical. Being part of the team is essential, and being able to determine what transportation needs to do in the midst of these emergencies is also very, very important. And we in Westerville City Schools and in Columbus City Schools worked hand in hand with our first responders, with our community agencies, with our building administrators, with our families to have these discussions to make sure that we were all on the same page as it relates to these threats and hazards. And we also realized that we had to continue adjust how we respond because things change over time. So we had to make sure that it was a living document that we addressed and edited as needed. Now, if you see on this slide, we continue to talk about threats and hazards planning. We're talking about including transportation and also identifying the roles and responsibilities that our staff need to have during an event. And it may vary, but just as important as we're identifying these threats and hazards and planning for them, we have to identify what our capabilities are and what needs to be added to ensure that we're responding as needed. So again, as we identify our threats, as we identify our hazards, we start to plan for them, we start to train for them, we start to drill for them. It should identify what's needed to ensure that we are as prepared as possible based on each threat or hazard. Just like in Columbus, we identified that during some threats and hazards, our capabilities may have been limited in certain areas. So we had to have memorandum of understandings with other organizations to ensure our capabilities were at its highest level. So at Columbus City Schools, we had a memorandum of understanding with a couple agencies, but one specifically was the Red Cross. We partnered with the Red Cross that if something really bad happened and the Red Cross had to respond, that it was identified in our MOU what the expectations are, which schools could be used, etc. So again, that collaborative approach was essential when identifying our capabilities and our lack thereof, which then rolled right into training. We know that once we identified our threats and hazards, that long list of possible bad things, we had to train. We had to complete our tabletop exercises, our functional exercises, and even up to our full-scale exercises. I'm sure many people on this call, on this webcast, have been involved in tabletop exercises, and I just can't emphasize enough how those need-to-need conversations have to take place at the building level, on the buses, between colleagues to discuss what our plans are if a threat or hazard presents itself. Then after we complete our tabletop exercises, we move to those functional exercises. I'm sure everyone on this call understands that those functional exercises are done to identify what we're going to do in the midst of emergency and try to identify those gaps that we have to fill, those areas that maybe need some improvement to ensure a better response during any threat or hazard that's transportation related. And then lastly, building up to that full-scale exercise. Just like here in Westerville City Schools, we're planning for a full-scale exercise in October. So it's taking us months to plan for that full-scale exercise and work with our other partners within the community to try to have a robust exercise to, again, hope that everything works as it should, but to measure what we're going to do to ensure that we get better. And one thing that we've identified with working with our local communities is that master scenario events list, better known as the MESL, which provides a timeline and location for the expected exercise events and injects. What we're talking about is the ability to create a MESL, again, the master scenario events list, to have injects in time and expectations that we wish to have in place throughout the throughout the full scale exercise, and then to look at that information based on that timeline to ensure that we're responding as need be. So having a measle and having the individuals able to create that measle and the expectations of it really helps us to build to a place that we're able to measure our successes and figure out what our next steps should be in the midst of an emergency. Also, I know everyone understands that communications is critical before, during, and after an emergency. So our transportation directors have to meet with our first responders, building principals and administrators, and others to discuss communications. You know, like I do, that many first responders and other agencies may have different channels, different vendors, different means of communication that may interfere during an emergency. So obviously we have to discuss these before an event occurs to do our best to get on the same page and know who's communicating to whom, how this communication takes place, and what needs to be done to clean these things up if we're not communicating as we should before and during an emergency. And obviously the best way is to test it, and to have a backup just in case our communications start to fall into difficulties. So what I'm saying is transportation directors and others have to be at the table to discuss transportation and communications at all levels. We realize as well that our transportation directors have to have a position as it relates to the incident command structure. In that operations section of the incident command structure, transportation has to have a role and a specifically identified role of what we're responsible for and who's responsible during an emergency. Obviously, if it's a large-scale emergency, we have to know where we're going, how we're getting there, who we're picking up, where we're taking them, if reunification is part of the plan, etc. And all of this has to be included in our incident command structure, has to be communicated in various levels to ensure that we're giving a phenomenal response with the ICS approach. And I know you understand this, but I have to communicate it. We have to have backup roles. We have to have other people who can step in if we or others on the ICS structure aren't available. We may be somewhere else. We may be off work, or someone else on our staff may have a role, but he or she may not be able to work that day for whatever reason. So we have to have backup personnel who are just as trained to ensure that we're doing as we need to do. And we experienced that a number of times, especially at Columbus City Schools, where, something bad happens and we look around and one of our staff are off work for whatever reason. So we had to have someone else step up, function in that role, and function in that role in a high level. And that's, again, what we planned for and we were able to do throughout our planning process. So what I really want to stop, I'm sorry, Allison, I just wanted to share that we do a phenomenal role. Transportation directors are amazing. Transportation staff do phenomenal work. So thank you for all that you do. Back to you, Allison.
I totally agree. Thank you very much, Stephen, for sharing all of those important considerations that schools can consider as they look to incorporate transportation directors or integrate them more comprehensively. I did want to remind everyone that The Q&A pod is there for you to use if you have any questions or if any questions have come up during this presentation. We will be answering questions a little bit later in today's webinar. But now I want to spend some time walking through how transportation directors can enhance the six-step planning process. As mentioned earlier, the most comprehensive and effective school EOP is developed by a multidisciplinary planning team, which adds value to the breadth, depth, and scope of the plan. Transportation directors should be members of a core planning team. Their perspective will help take into account the transportation-related resources, the condition of school buses, transportation areas, and bus routes that could impact the school community and make it more at risk or vulnerable to threats and hazards. The transportation director is not only a steward from the transportation staff, but also carries the safety and training messages from the core planning team back to bus drivers, dispatch, and other staff in the transportation group. In step 2, the planning team identifies hazards and threats unique to the school community and then prioritizes them. Assessments are an important source of information, such as site assessments, capacity assessments, and culture and climate assessments. Transportation directors may lead or serve as a member of the site assessment team, which will provide information on the potential impact of threats and hazards on school grounds, including bus zones and other transportation areas. The REMS-T Center has a free mobile application for conducting site assessments called Site Assess, and there's a flyer for that in our web links pod. Capacity assessments capture the resources available and staff capabilities, such as ham or CB radio experience, license to drive a bus or truck, and fire suppression skills. And then the culture and climate assessment will collect staff and students and staff members' perceptions of their safety, including bus drivers and other transportation staff. Transportation directors can be a part of the creation, dissemination, or analysis of all of these assessments. In step 3, the team decides which threats and hazards will be addressed in the EOP and then develops goals and objectives for each. During this work, the team will identify cross-cutting functions and develop goals and objectives for them. Transportation directors should participate in the development of goals and objectives for evacuation. Possible goals, which are broad general statements that indicate a desired outcome for the function of evacuation, could be as follows. Before an emergency, ensure that all students and staff know the evacuation route. During an emergency, evacuate the school immediately. After an emergency, confirm that all individuals have left the building. Transportation directors may also provide insight on continuity of operations, security, recovery, and many other functions. In step 4, the planning team builds upon the goals and objectives created in the previous step and then assigns courses of action that address the who, what, and how for achieving them. Together, they form annexes or portions of the EOP. Transportation directors should participate in scenario-based planning to imagine the different ways that an emergency may unfold, including on a school bus or while students are walking or biking to or from school. They may interject with the roles and responsibilities of their staff, such as notifying dispatch of the number of students on board, if any, reporting to a designated location, or reassuring students to keep them calm. In step 5, the planning team develops a basic plan for the school EOP, formats the annexes, and reviews all sections. After the plan is approved by leadership, the team should securely share portions with community partners. Transportation directors can ensure that the latest versions of the transportation-related MOUs are integrated into the draft EOP, as well as maps of off-campus evacuation routes. Finally, the planning team needs to implement the EOP. This means providing the whole school community with training and opportunities for practice. As Stephen mentioned, transportation directors should attend and even lead trainings and participate in or observe exercises. They can help ensure that the school practices emergencies during all settings and all times. As members of the core planning team, transportation directors will be able to contribute to the revisions to and maintenance of the EOP after an event, whether a real emergency or exercise. This is how planning teams can close the loop and ensure that the plan evolves to meet the needs of the school community. Now it is time for a question and answer session. We will begin with the questions that you have submitted to us, but we encourage you to continue to send our questions as they occur to you during this session by using that Q&A pod on your screen. Questions will be answered in the order in which they appear and as time permits. So the first question that we have for Steve is, how do we help protect special needs children that are bound to a wheelchair or have other disabilities?
Thanks, Allison, and I believe that's a phenomenal question. I'm a believer that the bus is an extension of the school building. Therefore, when we discuss training our students with disability, it has to start within the building. It has to start with their teacher, their aide, their parent or guardian, to discuss safety in the building and also to discuss safety on our buses. After that, we really have to involve ourselves in having discussions on our buses with our students with disabilities and do our best to train our staff and students with disabilities on what they need to do based on the incident, threat, or hazard that presents itself while on a bus.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve, for adding that. And we didn't go into much detail on this planning principle today, but we have a lot of information on our website on planning for individuals with access and functional needs. We have trainings and other downloadable resources on our website on this topic. It is important, and it is a foundation of emergency management planning, ensuring not only students but also staff and visitors with disabilities or other access and functional needs are considered in the emergency operations plan. We have another question that came in about training. What sort of training do bus drivers and bus aides receive on this topic? I will start, and Steve, you're welcome to add as you like. The Department of Transportation's National Highway Traffic Safety Administration offers a school bus driver in-service curriculum. It's accessible in the resource list that we have in the downloads pod, but modules in that curriculum include emergency evacuation, transporting students with special needs, student management, driver attitude, highway rail grade crossing safety, adverse weather conditions, knowing your route, loading and unloading. So a variety of important topics for school bus drivers to be aware of. And the REMS-T Center does offer a variety of trainings in addition to webinars focused on specific topics. We offer virtual trainings by request and live trainings by request, where we come and deliver trainings to your site on developing emergency operations plans 101. It's available in a train the educator and train the trainer format. Those are excellent trainings. And then we also have some online courses on emergency operations plan development available on our website as well. Those are self-paced and generate a certificate of completion.
And just to add, Allison, on top of what Allison stated, here in the state of Ohio, our Ohio Department of Education provides training through our regional trainers. So there's regional trainers in Ohio that I'm sure if you're looking for training, again, the resources that Allison mentioned are excellent. And also in the state of Ohio, our regional trainers through the Ohio Department of Education have training modules as well.
Thank you, Steve, for making that connection. And there may be more resources for in your state, from your state. So encourage you to connect with them. The REMST Center has a state map of emergency management resources on our website, and that will contain information on contact information, agency websites and more that pertain to your state. So that's another resource that's available to you. Another question that I'm going to direct towards you, Stephen, is how can transportation directors strengthen their relationship with the school system as well as the community to assist in transportation needs in the event of emergencies, including natural disasters?
Again, another phenomenal question. In terms of connectivity, it has to be based on collaboration. So with our experience here in Ohio, once we established the threats and hazards that we wished to include in our emergency operations plan, we reached out to those agencies that would help us in our response. And we needed some others at the table to help us, which could have included our superintendents or others at the time, to help guide and affect our needs. So my answer to the question is to have those community connections, to have standing meetings to bring people around the table to discuss responses to threats and hazards. And when you identify the gaps that are needed, is to reach out to those others, be it internally or externally, to help boost the support needed to protect our staff and students. So again, it's a collaborative approach, inviting people to the table and being able to discuss the needs that have been identified, which again will help to leverage these discussions.
Thank you, Steve. And those are very important concepts in this work. We often invite or encourage site hosts to invite their community partners to our training site requests so that there is that coordination and collaboration during the training, and that can be continued on after the training in emergency management planning work. Another question that came in, there are two questions related to MOU, Steve. I will pose them both. One question is, what are some of the organizations you have MOUs with? And the other question is, how detailed should our MOUs be?
The first question, the biggest one, again, was the one I discussed with the Red Cross, which really helps me move into the second answer, because we realized based on our responsibilities and based on the responsibilities of other organizations, the MOU had to be very specific. Many times in the midst of an emergency, we don't want any confusion. We want everything to be understood and clear. So it needs to be specific in the memorandum of understanding and then practiced. So if something is missing based on the drill or practice, the MOU can be adjusted, edited to ensure that it reflects all expectations when that particular agency is needed.
I agree. And just to add on what you shared, Stephen, I think that MOUs can sometimes be created as a result of conversations with community partners. So you may be engaging in emergency management planning with community partners and realize that maybe an MOU is needed, or an enhancement needs to be, or an MOU needs to be enhanced. So that's something else to consider. But the REMS Tea Center does have a few resources on MOUs. We have a specialized training module and a brand new online course on developing and enhancing MOUs with community partners. So we encourage you to check those out on our website. Stephen, another question that came in from an attendee is for you. The question is it beneficial for transportation directors to have NIMS training, National Incident Management System?
So the answer is yes. I'm a firm believer in NIMS, and by receiving that NIMS training and the multiple levels that we have an opportunity to receive training will help to communicate on the same level with our first responders, and the first responders communicate on the same level with transportation. So to really understand the intricacies of NIMS and the expectations within is critical. And then to understand the procedures that first responders will follow. And I think it also helps first responders in this training understand what transportation directors and other members of the school system need to have in place. So that's a big answer to say, yes, I'm a believer that transportation directors and others should have NIMS training.
Thank you, Stephen. Agreed. The National Incident Management System is a great resource to ensure that everyone is using the same terminology within your school community, but also with your community partners. And the REMS Tea Center released a new fact sheet last year on implementing NIMS, offering some practitioner-oriented strategies for education agencies, and that is downloadable from the REMS Tea Center website. Another question that came in is, we hold quarterly meetings with our bus drivers. What topics do you feel would be beneficial for bus drivers to review regularly? And that question is for you, Stephen.
Wow, that's a big question. Obviously, we're having this conversation with urban, suburban, and rural areas. So this may vary based on those particular areas. But some of the common discussions that need to take place from a transportation level as it relates to emergencies, one is the efficiency of the route. Are we able to identify which students are on our buses, where students have exited our buses? Are we able to track our students based on rosters? How are we being able to ensure that we know which students are on our buses and which students have exited our buses? I think that has to always be a conversation. I think also conversations have to be just safety related. Are we focusing on all of those safety things that our state, federal local government expects us to do. And again, I think communications has to continue to be a discussion. How are we able to communicate to our students? How are we able to communicate to our parents? How are we able to communicate to our schools and others before, during, and after an emergency? So if we continue to discuss communications at our meetings, if we continue to discuss students on and identifying our students on and off of our buses, and if we continue to just have these discussions about what we should do in the midst of a specific emergency, it will help our staff to be more comfortable with what those expectations are. I think another discussion has to be if there's a sub-driver on a bus. If you have a substitute driver driving a bus route, how are we informing that individual of the expectations if an emergency occurs? And how is that information communicated? How are we ensuring that they're safe? And how are we ensuring that they're able to keep our children safe? Those are just a few topics I think that should be discussed at every meeting.
Thanks so much, Steve. Great ideas and considerations, and thank you all for your questions. I did want to pose read aloud one last question that we got in, which is this webinar available for download? And as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available in archived form on our site within 7 business days after the event. So if you know someone that wasn't able to attend the event, or you want to share this webinar with someone else, you are able to do that. All of our webinars are archived and made accessible on our website for learning at any time. And for those of you who may have posed a question that wasn't answered, we will be attending to unanswered questions in the web chat on our community of practice immediately following this webinar, so stay tuned. A big thank you to our guest presenter, Stephen. You've brought such a wealth of information and discussion points to this important topic during the presentation and Q&A session. So thank you again. We do have a few resources for all of our attendees today that we would like to showcase for you, so that you may use, whether you're a transportation director or a school safety leader or a planning team member or a community partner or any other individual with an interest or role in school emergency management planning. We previously hosted a webinar on emergency evacuations, which is archived on our site for viewing at any time, and we have various publications on evacuation annexes, continuity of operations annexes, and more aspects of emergency operations plans. As I mentioned, the REMS-TA Center's free Site Assess mobile application for conducting site assessments is available for download. We've created trainings to assist you with conducting site assessments and using Site Assess, including a new online course, a downloadable module in our specialized training package, as well as asynchronous trainings by request in the virtual and in-person formats. The REMS-TA Center's toolbox contains resources from local and state practitioners that relate to this topic, including a sample school bus annex, training videos, and tabletop exercises and scenarios. And our partners have relevant resources as well. The National Center on Safe Supportive Learning Environments offers a downloadable training toolkit to address bullying on school buses and creating a positive school climate on the school bus. FEMA has a training presentation and facilitator's guide on evacuating the school bus, and the EPA has resources on healthy school environments via school buses, including a clean school bus funding program. Again, all of these resources mentioned and more are in our resource list available in the downloads pod. Of course, the REMS TA Center is also a resource for you. We're just an email or a phone call away, so please reach out if you have any technical assistance requests on any aspect of emergency management planning. And thank you once again for attending today's webinar. We appreciate you submitting your questions and engaging with us throughout the event. We hope to see you again at another webinar in our series or hear from you in the future. And we will now be heading to our community of practice to continue answering questions via a web chat.